I've discussed doing TRE or trauma release exercises a few times on this channel, and I really enjoyed doing them. The results were fascinating, but I've actually stopped doing them. In effect, I've only done TRE exercises once since January, which is 7 months now. And that time, which was about 2 months ago, I only did it for 3 minutes. And the reason isn't that I think TRE is bad, it's because it's such a powerful exercise. It's powerful in its effects. And it's not TRE that's the problem. What's been happening is that, I think anyway, the way I look at it, is that my nervous system has been waking up. It wasn't asleep, but parts of it were asleep. Parts of it had become so locked down, so constricted. And I suppose I was repressing certain feelings. Maybe I was repressing certain memories or feelings, memories of feelings. So, for example, I can express anger, but I was holding on to really deep anger from long, long ago. And this was mostly related to the childhood illness that I had between the ages of 2 and 4. It's actually been a fascinating process. So I'm not saying don't do TRE, but it is very powerful. So it's something that I would advise people to handle with care and just to know what you're getting into. So I started doing TRE last August, and I was doing it initially with a practitioner online. And in between sessions, I was sometimes doing it on my own. I didn't have major problems with it. And the reason that it became problematic was because I was supercharging it. I was actually, as an experiment, I was doing TRE and exposure therapy at the same time. So the reason that I started trying to do emotional release, which is what TRE is about, trauma release exercises, was because I've got a long-standing phobia of spiders. I've had phobias before in the past, and I've got over just about all of them. And it's just this one phobia that I could not get rid of. And I suppose because I'm actually a therapist myself, I do hypnotherapy and cognitive behavioural therapy. So when I started learning those modalities, I was practicing on myself. You know, you work with other students, and having a phobia of spiders, that arachnophobia, seemed the ideal thing to practice on. So I was always using it to practice exposure therapy and hypnotherapy, and it worked really well. And then once I started working with clients, if I was trying out a new approach, I would always try it on myself. And quite often I was using the arachnophobia to try things. And I started noticing that doing this, whatever method I was using, would quite often lead to feelings of panic, tiredness, exhaustion, in fact. And I would ask my tutors about this. For example, when I started learning about IFS, internal family systems, I did an online course, and we would sometimes have one-to-one sessions, and I would ask tutors about it. And quite often other students were involved. And sometimes it was the answers that other students raised that were the most helpful in effect, because then I would go and do more research and I would find things out on my own. I feel that this is a very under-researched area. You know, when I had therapy years ago in the 1990s, I remember my therapist saying that I would get a lot of tiredness and fatigue, and that eventually I would get more energy in the long run. But when I've asked people about that recently, it's been really difficult to find answers from people who are considered experts. And it's quite often other people who have similar symptoms and that have been struggling with similar symptoms who've given me the best information about this. So I was doing TRE with exposure therapy as a kind of combination. In other words, I was looking at pictures of spiders or sometimes videos of spiders as I was doing the TRE exercises. Just don't do that. I would not recommend it. At first, I felt that I was getting good results in that I could feel feelings going through. Yeah, I felt that I was really addressing the problem. But then the fatigue got really intense. And in January, I remember I was cat sitting actually, which was quite lucky because I was so exhausted. I had booked an avalanche awareness course, which meant going up to the mountains, and I needed to get into shape for that course because I knew that I would need to have a certain level of fitness. But just getting out was so difficult. I was so tired. And I think that's when I first realised that I was overdoing the TRE. And that was when I decided to stop doing it. But the fatigue continued intermittently. You know, some days I could get up and about and I was able to go on hill walks in the snow. I was able to be energetic for one day, and then the next day I would go into collapse. And that cycle continued. And that's the way it's been over the last 6 months, on and off. It's difficult to describe the kind of fatigue. I often describe it as chronic fatigue because it feels like chronic fatigue. It feels like the symptoms are similar to the symptoms that people who have chronic fatigue describe, but it's not chronic, it's intermittent. People who have chronic fatigue have it for months or even years. And thankfully, I haven't had that. With me, it lasts for maybe a day, maybe a couple of days, sometimes 5 or 6 days. And when it happens, I am absolutely flattened. It's so difficult to discuss it with people because most people, when you raise the subject, think you're just saying, oh, I was a bit tired. I found it difficult to get out of bed one morning. But sometimes I've been sitting in a chair watching a video and I've been so tired, I felt too tired to keep sitting up. So I've had to actually get a mattress out and put it on the floor and lie on the floor. I was that tired. And yet I might not have needed sleep. I might have had enough sleep. But I still was too tired to even lift my head. And people with chronic fatigue will know what I'm talking about. That you just feel absolutely flattened. But this period actually has been quite a learning curve. I've learned loads. It's been like a kind of roller coaster journey. Some of it has been really good because it's taught me such a lot. Not just about myself. It's been a really good learning process for helping clients as well. Because when a client is going through anxiety, you might think maybe exposure therapy would help. But I know that it's a tool that's got to be treated very carefully. I know from experience. I know that if a client comes in and says, my sleep's been disrupted, that it's not just that they've been tossing and turning at night. It could be really intense. So I've learned such a lot. And most of all, I've learned about myself. I've learned about patterns, about what I can put up with and what's too much. And that's why I tried doing 3 minutes of TRE. A while ago, and it did help, but even that produced a lot of intensity, a lot of tiredness. There have been some really high points. For example, another time I was cat sitting a few months ago, I had been feeling extreme fatigue and I'd also been feeling a lot of emotions, and some of those emotions were great because in the past, I know that in the past I tried to stop myself crying, and I think this was because I felt that if I started crying it would be such a flood I wouldn't be able to stop. So I learned over the years to hold back the tears. But in the time when I was feeling tired, I found that I was crying more easily. Sometimes I didn't even feel sad. The tears were just coming more easily. And in some ways, I felt that I'm becoming more in touch with my emotions, which is a great thing. So there was this weekend when I was cat sitting and I was just exhausted. It was really draining. And one morning I got up. I was actually feeling okay, I went into the kitchen, and in the sink there was a big spider, not like a really big house spider, but it's still pretty big. And usually if that happened, I would either want to vacuum it up, I know that's cruel, or I would get my spider catcher, which I have at home. It's got a long handle, so I don't have to go too close to the spider. I didn't have a spider catcher. I didn't want to kill it. I could have got the cat. The cat would have disposed of it for me, but I didn't want to be cruel. I wanted to be able to take it out of the window. And my heart was racing at first, but I noticed that actually I wasn't quite as anxious as I usually get. My anxiety was at a lower level, and I was able to go into the cupboard, get myself a glass, and scoop the spider up into the glass. And one thing that happens, that, this is something that I just would not have been able to do maybe a couple of years ago. I have done it a couple of times with quite small spiders, but not with one that was this size. And to get so close to it, the thing that really triggers me is when the spider gets panicky and the spider starts moving around really fast. That's when I start going, ah! So I knew that was going to happen as I put that jar towards it. But I was able to do it. And my anxiety was not nearly as intense as it normally is. I was able to put it into that jar and then put a lid over it, take it outside the window, and I watched it scurry away. And that is something that I just would not have been able to do a while ago. So I knew that was a milestone, a breakthrough. When things like that happen, you think this is all worth it. It is so exhausting, so draining, but it is worth it. I've learned to pace myself. I've learned that I have quite a physical job, and it's only a part-time job. I'm a summer mountain leader. So I take people up to the mountains in summer. So now is the busiest time of year, really. And it's been so difficult having fatigue, having these bouts of intense fatigue, and not knowing if it's going to hit, when it's going to hit me. So I've had to learn how to pace myself. I've had to learn how to recognize the cycles. And if I've got a big day coming up, I would have to get fit, and I've had to maintain my fitness. And it's all about pacing and knowing how much I can do and how much could trigger me, because it's not just the TRE that can trigger the fatigue. Sometimes just doing exercise can trigger it. So what happened recently, I had 3 very big events, big days in the mountains. And in between that, I had actually arranged a long-standing arrangement to go away for a few days, mountain climbing, biking, cycling. And all of this happened within 3 weeks, really. So I had to really prepare for that, to make sure that I was building up my fitness in between these bouts of intense fatigue. And I managed to do it. I managed to keep going. But when I was away on this trip mountaineering, it was about two days. That turned into 2 days of complete exhaustion. I wasn't able to climb the hill. I climbed one small hill, but the rest of the time I was just lying around. Luckily, it was lovely weather, so I enjoyed it anyway. And then the week after that, I was back doing the mountain leading. And I did it. I did everything. I was so pleased. But when I got back from the last assignment, I just collapsed. I was just incapable. I was completely floored with exhaustion, and that exhaustion lasted a week. I was able to function. I was able to get up, put my clothes in the wash, do things like that, in between lying down and in between long periods of rest, which is integration, really. The rest is about integrating the process. But it wasn't easy. At least I know what's going on now. What happens is that even after stopping doing the TRE, the process still keeps going. My nervous system has woken up. And it's not going to go back into the bottle now. It's not, all that repressed emotion isn't going to go back. So I've been dealing with it in waves. It comes up, quite often it comes up in the middle of the night. And that's really strange because I'll get woken up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., not every night. It's only occasional. But when I get woken up, I cannot get back to sleep. I know the signs because I'll wake up and I'll feel very hot. And it's a sort of pumpy feeling, as if my body's sort of activated. And then even if the temperature is maybe 19 degrees centigrade, I feel as if I'm in a sauna. I just feel so hot. And eventually I just have to get up. Maybe I'll lie for a bit and I'll try and allow the feelings, allow them to come up. And sometimes that helps and I can get back to sleep. But other times, I just know that I have to get up. And yet, it feels as if only a small proportion of my brain is functioning. Maybe a quarter or something. It's really strange. So I get up, but I can't do anything that requires brain power. And usually it means that I get up and start cleaning, clearing up, tidying. And I'll do that for a couple of hours and then I'll start to feel that I'm getting more and more tired and I'll go back to bed maybe for 3 or 4 hours and wake up feeling really groggy. You could just stay up. Sometimes I do just stay up when I feel like that, stay up all day. But I know that only part of my brain is functioning. So I can only do that if I don't have anything important to do later on. So it's kind of difficult, but thankfully that only happens occasionally. And usually the next night I get a good sleep. And I just know that what's happening is a cycle. And the cycles seem to be getting shorter, so that's an excellent sign. That shows that the process is hopefully coming to a conclusion. The other problem is actually discussing it with people. Unless someone else has gone through a similar thing, people really don't understand what's going on. And I can't blame them. I mean, this isn't something that has been publicized, I think, outside social media platforms like Reddit, YouTube. But unless you're looking for that information, you probably won't come across it. And I reckon a lot of people are holding on to, a lot of people have nervous systems that's holding on to old trauma, old emotions that are effectively repressed. But they might be struggling it in ways that they don't even understand. And when I try to explain, I'm really slow today on the mountains. And it's because, especially when you work in the mountains and suddenly you have an off day and you're just puffing and panting. Sometimes it's been because my immune system has been compromised as well. Sometimes it feels as if my immune system is really low. So I've had a lot of hay fever, things like that, asthmatic-y type things. I didn't even know about mast cells before all this happened. I only learned about mast cells, about mast cell activation earlier this year. And I realised that that's probably what's been going on with me, that when emotions are released, often it triggers this sort of physical reaction, which can result in things like hay fever, breathing issues. And I know what's going on now. I mean, at first I didn't. It's something I'll have to discuss more in another video, I think. But trying to explain this to people is so difficult. And I don't mean to say that they're not sympathetic. They just don't have any experience of it. And they don't have any understanding of why I'm suddenly huffing and puffing, really feeling exhausted. Sometimes I do just say, I've been going through a lot of emotional release. And that in itself can cause embarrassment. And it can be a conversation stopper, or it can sometimes be a conversation starter. So thank goodness for social media is what I say, because it's only on social media that I find other people who really, really get what I've been going through. I'm not complaining. This has just been a fascinating journey. It's been so difficult. And I wouldn't advise anyone not to do TRE, but I would say do it with caution. If you have a lot of trauma, a lot of deep emotions to release, don't just dive into TRE on your own. I mean, first of all, I did it with a practitioner, even though that was online. I had already been studying therapy and doing therapy on myself, so I kind of had an idea of what was going on. But if you're new to this, just go really carefully, be really cautious. I would say if someone has a lot of trauma, then only do TRE if you're already working with a trauma therapist. And it doesn't mean that you have to do TRE with that therapist, but you need someone who can be there for you when those difficult things, when those difficult effects come up. Some people feel as if they're going mad, as if, you know, these symptoms are going to be there for their whole life, and that they've done lasting damage to themselves. And that's not the case. But you need to really know what's going on and really understand the process. So I would say I highly recommend TRE, but it really has to be done with caution. I don't regret doing it one bit. And I have a couple of big days coming up in the hills, big assignments, and I'm really looking forward to them. And after the second one, I've got a bit of a break. So I'm going to start doing TRE again during that break. And when I start it again, I'm just going to be very cautious, just do a few minutes, see how it goes, really, really understand the symptoms. Ideally, I would love to go back to doing TRE regularly, once a week, maybe twice a week. And I hope that I can get back to doing that. But at the moment, I have to be very, very careful.